Join us today. In today's webinar, we are going to cover job search and networking strategies, and then we're applying this to for those that work in supply chain or those that aspire to work in the field of supply chain. If you missed part one, you can go to supplychaincareers.com and you'll access the webinar page, and then you can replay the webinar at your leisure. We're going to have a Q&A session at the very end. So if you want to submit questions, and you could submit those as we go along, just hit the Q&A button at the very bottom, and then you can submit your question. They'll be reviewed, and then we'll get to those in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. So today we're going to cover, again, job search and networking strategies for supply chain professionals. There is a part three that's being held on May the 25th. At the very end, we'll show you how you can register for that third webinar of the part three of the three-part series. So we're going to get started. I'm going to do quick introductions. We'll go through the agenda, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation. So today, cover a quick introduction. We're just going to give you a quick overview of our new company, our sister company, Supply Chain Careers. Again, supplychaincareers.com, as well as SEM Talent Group. We'll start out with networking and how you can leverage that for many different benefits, including a job search. They kind of go hand in hand. And then from there, we'll get into how do you develop and execute a job search strategy. And as I said earlier, we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So quick introduction. So my name is Rodney Apple. I am the founder and managing partner of SEM Talent Group. We are a national end-to-end supply chain recruitment and executive search firm. I'm also the co-founder of Supply Chain Careers. And my background is pretty much all in recruitment. So I've spent the last 20 plus years completely specialized in end-to-end supply chain recruitment. And then the first half of my career, worked for a handful of companies that you'll know, starting out with the Home Depot, built their very first supply chain department, led all of their logistics supply chain recruitment. From there, went to Coca-Cola, led all of their supply chain recruitment, including all of the different operations, factories, distribution centers, and so forth. And then from there, I went to Kimberly-Clark, and wrapped up with Cummins. In the last 10 years, I've been mainly leading SEM Talent Group, focused across most major industries, and then again, specializing across every aspect of the end-to-end supply chain discipline. And I'm going to turn it over to Hinesh. He's my business partner in both of these businesses.
Thanks, Rodney. So hi, everyone. Pleased to be here. Hinesh Patel. I am co-founder of Supply Chain Careers. I'm also a senior partner with SEM Talent Group, both exciting opportunities, exciting businesses, and we hope they'll be useful for you here. Previously, my career was split into two parts. One, the larger part in industry. So I started at Honeywell as an engineer, also worked in their corporate headquarters in strategy and M&A. I spent several years with Eaton and with Hillenbrand. Diversified manufacturing and industrial and consumer products in roles leading up to and including up to the C-suite chief strategy officer. After that, I spent 8 years with Aegon Zender, a tier one Swiss-based executive recruitment firm, and did a lot of C-level work there, including board work. Led their chemicals practice, also previously led their US supply chain practice. And since then, I've transitioned into these two businesses, and looking forward to helping you guys as we go forward here.
All right, so we'll do a very quick overview. Hinesh, you want to talk about the Supply Chain Careers, and I'll cover SEM Talent?
Yeah, so Supply Chain Careers is a brand new sister business to the SEM Talent Group. The SEM Talent Group is the recruitment side of things. SCC, as we call it, Supply Chain Careers, is focused really on two things. It's focused, number one, on helping students and professionals improve their careers. And number two, it's focused on helping employers hire, develop, retain, recruit, etc., their supply chain talents. And so it's either from the professional / student side all the way to the employer side. And it's a free resource. It's available online. and it has all sorts of tools. So we'd encourage you to visit and investigate and learn. So podcasts, job board. It has a content hub with all sorts of articles, blogs, useful information on how to interview, how to improve your online presence, all of these things, different types of supply chain careers, etc. And then for the employers, it has a lot of useful information on how to think about your organization, how to have the teams under you structured properly, how to recruit for the right talent, and how to attract it, how to build your brand. So all the things you think about in the talent side of things as it pertains to all things supply chain. And we define supply chain pretty broadly. And in the future, we'll continue to add a lot of content, and we look forward for you guys to sign up, be part of our community, and come and visit often, learn, use it as a tool, both to do your own job well, but also on your own personal career side. And Rodney, you want to give a little background on SEM Talent Group, please?
Sure. So as the name, with the SEM, I wanted to brand the company instead of having my last name, Apple and Associates. I wanted to make it very loud and clear that we specialize in supply chain management. So again, 20 years myself in this field. Founded the company in 2004, and we are basically industry agnostic. We cover everything from the logistics, transportation, warehousing, fulfillment, to global sourcing, procurement, everything under the manufacturing four walls, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, all the different planning cycles, demand, supply, production, and so forth. And really, a lot of it is in operations. That's where most of the jobs fall, under the supply chain umbrella. We focus on levels from your staff level, exempt salary, all the way up to chief supply chain officer, COO, president, and so forth. Again, most of what we do is in the shipper side, so manufacturing, all different flavors of manufacturing. We do a lot in the retail as well as wholesale, and then we cover service providers, especially 3PLs and related. So that's SEM Talent Group. If you'd like to connect with us, Hinesh and I are both very active on LinkedIn. So you're pretty simple. We have unique names. You can find us there very easily. Supply Chain Careers has presence on most of the main social media sites, especially LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. So look us up there, like, follow, subscribe. We do put out a lot of content, both on our site as well as across our social channels. All right, let's get started with the meat. I'll turn it over to you, Hinesh, to kick things off on networking.
Yeah. So I'll spend a few minutes here, everyone in the audience, just talking about networking. But before I do, just to try to set the baseline here, everyone talks about networking. We know, it's useful for careers, and we know that we should be doing it. But people sometimes have a hard time putting their finger right on what it is. What really is it? And how do we do it better? How do we do it better, especially as it pertains to opening up career potential for us? We all want to do better. We all want to do better, not only in our next job, but in our current job. Networking can help. So part of this is to take some of the mystery out of this. So stay with us throughout. We're going to have a full session on this, and we're going to have some Q&A at the end as well. So if we go to the next slide, please. One of the things here that is important is that, okay, everyone has a register in their brain that says, yeah, I should be doing something. First thing is, what's the evidence for it, and what really is networking? So more than a decade ago, there was this very well-known researcher, professor at the University of Chicago Booth School, the Booth School of Business. It's a world-renowned business school, as many of you may know. He began to study this, and it was groundbreaking at the time because no one had really done it. People know that you should be connected, but no one had actually gone in and said, what's the actual field evidence for this? They had empirical evidence, but what's kind of the actual field data show? And what he came up with was something quite remarkable, and it's now become ingrained in the academic community, and it has also come out into the business world. And basically, the top level finding, which you can kind of see here on this chart, is that there is a clear correlation between people who are well networked and people who are doing well in their career. And if you take a look at this chart here, it's a predictor of career success. You can see on the on the y-axis is relative performance. So they measured this in terms of compensation, promotion, what ratings they got when they did job reviews. So things to measure performance. So it's not perfect, but with enough statistical data, you can get a bead on it. And on the x-axis, it is what does their network look like? And if you think about networks on extremes, on the one hand, you can see a very narrow network. So if you look on this side of your chart, I believe, you'll see, which should be the right side, you should see a little emblem there or a diagram where it shows a network of someone in the middle and then 4 connections around it. That's a closed network, and it's a small network. On the opposite side, you can see an expanded network, and that's someone, you know, who's reaching out. So it's kind of an interesting metaphor. You know, it's basically like arms reaching out into other nodes, and those nodes have little orbital systems around them each. So this person is known as a connector. So one way to think about this is what what does your network look like? How connected are you? And where does this place you in terms of getting into the flow of opportunities? People who are connecting various groups in between groups, that center point, those people are true connectors. And one way to think about it is we all know people perhaps in our lives that grew up in, for whatever reason, in a kind of self-contained group, and they kind of stayed in that group. They have not branched out. They have not made connections, so they miss out on a lot. It's not to say it's good or bad. It's just to say that they miss out on opportunities, miss out on information. And we know others that seem to be connected in all sorts of ways. They're connected into the government. They're connected into industry, associations within the organization. They're connected up. They're connected down, sideways. They're connected out in industry. So there's many different, they're connected geographically. They may have people they work with in Europe and Asia and Latin America and the US, et cetera. So those are the types of people that bring disparate groups together. So that's a very open, broad network. And so the broader the network, on average, all things being equal, the more it's correlated to career success. So it's something that has been empirically proven. And so it gives you a representation. And this study is available online for basically free. You can get abstracts of it if you're interested in further learning. So with that, we can step into the next topic, which is networking mistakes, right? So we kind of have defined what networking is, and we've defined why networking is important. One of the things that we want to help you understand is what are the biggest no-nos when doing networking. So the single biggest one we see is doing it only when you need a job. And of course, it's important to do it when you need a job, right? But it's far more effective to think about this as a little bit of your normal routine. So you should be doing it 5, 10, 15, 20%. It varies depending on your function, but you should be doing it as part of your ongoing job. In one analogy I like to use, and it's not a perfect analogy, but it gives you a metaphor. Think of it as farming. So in farming, if you scatter seeds rarely, and come harvest time, you're not going to know exactly what kind of crop you have. You're going to have a poor crop more than likely, and you may even have some weeds in there. So meaning bad contacts. So think of it that way. But on the flip side, if you plant seeds regularly, you do it as part of, in each season, you plant an early spring, a late spring, you plant summer crops, you plant winter crops, and you think of it as watering and tending to your plants. Well, then your crop is going to increase not only in value, but it's going to increase in volume, and it's going to increase, almost more importantly, in quality. So this is one way to look at relationships. So that's why I say, as it is with farming, so it is with relationships. So one thing you may begin to ask yourself, or a few things you may begin to ask yourself, are what qualities are in your network? what's the longevity of the relationships you have in your professional network? Are you depositing enough? Are you planting enough seeds along the way so that later you can make a withdrawal when you need it? So it's not just when you need a job. Are you helping? How are you reaching out to others? Are you coaching them? Are you advising others? Are you reaching up to help people above you, underneath you? Are you helping people out in industry? Are you connecting with them? And do you periodically show that you're willing to help others and to make disparate connections between different networks? How do you select who you're picking? You know, so there should be some end goal in mind to say, okay, you can't network with everyone. So which ones make more sense to build towards where you're going? So I encourage everyone to ask themselves these questions so you can minimize what we see is probably the single biggest challenge in networking is that I'll do it when I'm ready to look for a job. Well, there are many reasons why you should do this, and we're going to get to this why you should do it now, which is what are the benefits of networking? If you think about the benefits of networking, there are many, many of them, but I'm going to list a few here so that you can begin to get your arms around them and see why networking is important to do all the time. And it's not really just for getting a job. So first of all, yes, indeed, it does open new doors. It can create new opportunities for jobs. But it can do so much more. It can build relationships, mutually beneficial relationships. I've seen a number of times where people go in to network, and it's happened to me as well, where you go in to network, you know, just because you think, okay, this is an organization that's interesting to me. Maybe I would like to work with them one day, or maybe this is an organization I would like to serve one day, and it ends up being a partnership of sorts. I've seen supply chain partnerships pop up from it, and so what it does is it creates a business opportunity perhaps that you didn't expect or you didn't see because being exposed to different things is kind of like travel. It makes you think creatively, makes you think differently. Um, it exposes you to new ways of thinking that perhaps you hadn't seen before, new tools. So this is in your own normal course of business. It can help you the benefits of networking. And then later, if you need to translate that into questions for a job search or advice on a job search, you can parlay that later. But now you're gaining value all along. It can also be used if you're in a market facing role where you're in supply chain, but perhaps you have a role where where your organization is actually fulfilling orders, or perhaps you're doing customer service or support. Um, and leading an ops center for that, a recycling center, a return center. Um, it can lead to new business development or generating leads. So don't discount networking forward in the supply chain as well into the customer base. It not only keeps your finger on the pulse of what's going on there and allows you to see things perhaps that a lot of people in supply chain don't see because they tend to be on average inwardly focused. This allows you to see what's going on, and occasionally a good supply chain executive or professional can even see business opportunities perhaps that weren't there, and that's of great value because the supply chain professional will, whether they're in procurement or distribution or in manufacturing, they'll see things out in the market differently a lot of times than a pure marketing or a pure salesperson because they bring a different perspective. And so that can lead to unique solutions. It can be something as simple as repackaging. You guys may have heard the famous story from Jack Welch when he was building his career. He built it in GE Plastics, and he did it because he saw that people were pushing out plastic in a small flake form, and it was very sticky and hard. And all he did was go back and tell the people in manufacturing and the people in marketing at GE, if we made these into little hard pellets instead of these little sticky flakes or sticky powder, it would be so much easier for our customers to load, unload, clean up. And they did it, and they I believe they even gained some intellectual property on certain parts of the process, and they gained a huge amount of market share. I think it was something like 5 to 8 points of market share, which is a monstrous leap forward. So this is the kind of thinking that can help you in your networking and gain you opportunities going forward. It can also help you if you're leading a team, if you're looking to recruit or hire, develop talent, and develop your group. So this keeps your eyes scanning. And when you need someone, suppose you're leading a series of operational centers, a series of distribution centers, and you need 2 or 3 general managers for sites. Well, this is a way to keep connected and ping your warehouse, ping your network for, I need some good people like this. And as you build trust in a network, you'll get referrals back in, and perhaps if you do it well, you'll get grade A referrals, because now you have developed a relationship and they understand what you need, and you can get the right talent into your organization, thus improving your own group's performance and your reflection on yourself. So there are many ways. I could go on and on. You can stay on top of your industry and understand the trends. You can elevate your own personal brand and your own personal reputation. Perhaps you get on some podcasts or other things. And finally, you can also gain personal satisfaction to knowing you're doing the right thing, especially when you're reaching down into the organization and helping to network through mentoring, or helping people out in universities where maybe you're helping students plan their careers. There are many ways to reach down where you once were 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, and helping them move up. And you gain a personal sense of satisfaction, and there are benefits to that as well. So, keep all these in mind as you think through why you should do networking all the time, and it will ultimately culminate in better recruiting, better positioning for your own self, and self-satisfaction. Rodney, I think I'll turn it over to you for networking avenues.
That's right. So, I think we've covered the importance. You can go back to a very popular quote that you hear often, especially as you start out your career. I can go back. I remember when I first started out, and my parents may have said this, son, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So, it's very true. It's really what you know and who you know. So you got to be a strong performer, and you've got to be a great networker. There's a reason these folks make it up into the C-suite, or, hit their goals, and are high performers. They're good at what they do, but they also have solid networks. So just bear that in mind. Now that we know the importance, where do you network? So, some of the obvious places you think of are associations. You've got many out there these days. Everything from the CSCMP, you've got ASCM, formerly APIX, ISCM on the procurement side, and there's a host of others. So you've got supply chain and functional industries. Associations, and you've also got industry related associations. So a quick Google search will point you to the right information. They have conferences, they have chapters. Now, obviously with the pandemic, we've kind of went virtual, but things are starting to open up, and we're starting to see conferences and things getting a little bit back to normal. We anticipate that that's going to accelerate as we move through the summer, and more people getting vaccinated and so forth. You can volunteer. They're always looking for volunteers and people to help, at the chapter level, as well as at the corporate level with the associations. You can leverage their, all of them have different ways to connect within the association. Typically, you'll find an online membership directory. These are fantastic for looking up people at certain companies or certain industries or in certain cities and states. So you definitely want to leverage that as a tool. You've got broader business communities. We've got the Chamber of Commerce. That's the number one. We've got one here in Asheville. They're in pretty much every city, and it's a fantastic way to do more local-based networking. There's the Business Networking International, BNIamerica.com. Business journals. I know when I was in Atlanta, we had the Biz Journals for the Atlanta area, and I used to get theirs. They have a calendar of networking events. You've got, go back into your academia. I think this is one of probably the most under-leveraged networking groups is people that you went to college with. LinkedIn makes it super easy to get out there, run a search on your alma mater, and put in some supply chain oriented keywords, and you can get a sense of where others have moved on to in their career, and people tend to want to help out their fellow alumni. So it's a great resource. And again, super easy to do when you look it up on LinkedIn and just put in the same university that you went to, and then conduct some outreach and take it from there. Obviously referrals, especially when you're starting up a job search, which is what part of this webinar is about, you definitely want to lean into that network you've developed so far. So think about former people you've worked with. Again, LinkedIn makes it really easy to identify those folks, and you can kind of see where they moved on to. If they've been promoted, if they changed jobs, and it's a great way to kind of kick off your job search is by starting with who you know the best. It could be family members, it could be people you go to church with, or whatever. You've got civic organizations, Rotary, Kiwanis, Elks Club, Moose Clubs, Lion Club. There's a host of those types of organizations. You can take a class at your local community college. You've got Toastmasters. And then you've got the whole online networking, which is vast, especially with all the different social media sites. You know who they are. I don't need to cover the list. You got Clubhouse, which is a brand new one. It's kind of like little, rooms that you can go into, common topic areas, and you can get in there and network with folks in real time. Obviously, LinkedIn is the big one, so that's where you're going to spend most of your time on the social media side, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. As I talked about, online networking, that's what all of us have been doing for the most part through the course of this pandemic. And now that things are starting to open up, I know everybody, not everybody, but most people are chomping at the bit to get back out and to, rub elbows and, get out for, coffee or a beverage or lunch. So we're excited to move back into that normalcy. But when you think about online networking, there's online or digital, and then you've got the in-person. Ideally, you want to do both. When it comes to online networking best practices, I like to look at it as there's the inbound side and the outbound side. So the inbound side is really all the things you do to form your online presence, call it your personal branding. So you're attracting people into you, inward. It could be dialing in your LinkedIn profile, which we'll touch on earlier. And that was actually part one webinar as we talked about resume and LinkedIn profile optimization. So if you didn't catch that, I would encourage you to go back, especially if you're not getting the best results out of, your resume and LinkedIn profile. So think about the onbound, think about the outbound is really all the activities that you do across the different channels to connect with people. So that's like the outreach. You can do that through social media. You can do it directly through phone, through email. So those are kind of the main tools. Now, you don't want to get out there and haphazardly start networking and engaging people. The first step is really to think about the type of people you want to connect with. And so you want to have some goals around it. And this goes back to kind of, if you're networking for a job, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm wide open. I'm open to industry. I want to keep my mind open." Well, that's okay, but you always want to have at least a starting place, and it should center around, the kind of things you like doing, right? The kind of work you're good at, the kind of size companies and all that. So you want to have some structure to it. As you conduct these outreach, always have a goal in mind. Just don't reach out to people. "Hey, I'm looking for a job." You want to have, you don't be thinking about, at the end of the day, how can I, networking is all about, people think it's about how can I benefit me. Networking is really the mutual benefit. So always be thinking, as you're about to establish a new connection, is how can I help this person? You want to develop the goals. What is that mutual benefit of connecting? And you want to spell out, have a written list of how you can benefit that individual. You typically want to, aim to make take it from starting up a dialogue and then see where it goes from there, typically a call or, meet up for coffee or whatnot. And you want to stay highly organized. And we're going to give you some tips on how to do that here in just a minute using different tools, like whether it's Outlook or CRM and so forth. And then the goal after you make that initial connection, you establish how you can help each other. Oftentimes, and this is what people make the mistake, is they don't stay in touch. They don't stay on the radar screen, or they just check in. "Hey, I'm just checking in. Anything new?" You always want to try to add value through every connection point that you make. And one of the key tips I want to bring up here is, the more you give, think about the more you give, the more you receive. That is so true in life, and it's very true in business as well. So bear that in mind. Those are just some general tips. Again, I'm not going to get into how to set up your LinkedIn. We did that on the first webinar. We'll have time today, so just go back and check that out. Got a lot of good information there. Choose your tools wisely. It depends on, a lot of this depends on the kind of work you do or the industry. You certainly don't want to go down the rabbit holes Clubhouse is a great tool. There are some supply chain forums on there. We've been definitely checking that out lately. Feedly's a good tool to stay up top of trends in the marketplace. But, LinkedIn is really where you're going to spend most of your time. Strongly encourage you to check out the mobile apps and get those on your phone. Utilize those so you can stay in touch with people in real time when you're on the road and so forth. LinkedIn has an awesome jobs search a job app that you can download to your phone and stay connected to openings that are popping up in real time and so forth. You've got Facebook. There's I think groups are where the real action is at. We've got a group called Supply Chain Jobs, about 10,000 people in there. It's a global group. So, you can check that out. It's a great place to network. You've got Twitter, and you've got a whole slew of places where you can get out there and connect with people. And then Jibber Jobber, is an app that you can download to kind of track and manage your job search as well. So the point here is, leverage the tools, but make sure that you're getting the right level of benefit for the right level of effort. And if you're not getting the right traction, it may be time to kind of ditch the tool. And remember, LinkedIn is the #1 business networking site, and that's where you're going to spend a lot of your time. As I mentioned earlier, there are some events that are being scheduled. There's still a whole lot of digital events that are taking place throughout the, supply chain associations, industry associations. Here's just a handful that we did some basic research. We noticed Gartner's got an event coming up. CSCMP has their annual conference coming up. There's Home Delivery World, and there's others out there too. Some are kind of waiting to see what happens before they pull the trigger. So, I would encourage you to just stay active, hold your network, and get a good sense of what events are taking place. And again, we're so excited to get back to seeing people in person, and we're really hoping things will fully open up here as we move throughout the rest of the year. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of the importance of networking. It's not just for the job search. We went through all the benefits. We've shown you some real data of why it's important, and it's really that's where all the magic happens in the job search. I know everybody gets frustrated as can be when you're out there posting for jobs and that's your main strategy. You're not hearing back. I know employers are frustrated these days because, it seems like there's more openings in supply chain than there are candidates, almost probably a negative unemployment rate, I would guess. So, when it comes to the job search, that's why we combine networking and the job search topic, because we know that networking is really where all the magic occurs. So we're kind of going to get into some tips there. And I think it all starts out, and I think this is super important as you're beginning a career in supply chain. The field of supply chain, it is enormous. I would argue there's more career paths you can tap into in supply chain than any other career field. And having recruited in it, I feel very confident to make that statement. I think IT is up there too in terms of diversity. So you've got, if you're starting out your career, you want to be thinking about, again, don't go haphazardly into, I just want to find the first job. It's all about what kind of salary, who can make that is the wrong way to look at it. You got to be looking at things from a holistic. Everything needs to align with your goals. So just to kind of provide a high level overview of the careers and to show you how diverse they are. You've got shippers, and it's not what you think. It's companies that are basically either they make the product or they resell it. So manufacturing, you got raw materials, components, the whole finished goods, equipment, and so forth. And they cover everything, just about every industry there, from chemicals, pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, and so forth. Now look around you, all the products around you were manufactured at some point. You've got retailers. Obviously, a lot of change in retail. Brick and mortar is still going for the most part, and then some companies are no longer with us because they did not make the advancement quick enough into e-commerce. So e-commerce now is super hot, especially with the pandemic, and it's a great place to build a career because so many people are shopping online these days. So think of retail as more of that B2C, getting product to that individual consumer. And then you've got the whole other side. What I look at is wholesale distribution, resellers of products that are mainly going to business. So you hear the term B2C and B2B. Then you've got a whole host of service providers that support these, manufacturing, resell, wholesale. You've got third-party logistics. You layer above that 4PL, carriers of all shapes and sizes, from less than truckload, ocean, intermodal, rail, air, parcel, And now, drone is starting to show up. You got management consulting from the big boys, the big four. You've got a lot of niche or boutique supply chain consulting firms that have popped up over the years. Some of these companies are getting very big very quickly. You've got technology is huge from your TMS, WMS. Now we're starting to see blockchain, Internet of Things, RFID, and so forth. We mentioned associations. You can work on that side. You can work in academia, and so forth. And then you got to think about, once you figure out, okay, I want to check out these types of industries or companies, think about the company size and the ownership model. You've got public corporations, you've got private, you've got nonprofit, you got private equity, venture capital, startup companies. We're working with some right now that are infant startups in the very beginning, later stage startups, small, mid-sized, large, domestic, multinational, global corporations. So once you get a sense of that, you want to figure out, what am I good at? What are your strengths? What are you not so good at? What do you really want to be good at? Think about the industries you're interested in that we just covered. Think about the ones that are poised for growth. Think about the functional areas that are doing well. And I would say right now in supply chain, everything is hot, especially sourcing, manufacturing, and so forth. So take a look at those areas. Do you want to work across the supply chain, or do you want to build a career inside of a single function? And it all depends on what you want to do, what you like to do, what you're good at, and so forth. Think about how the pandemic and other big disruptors have shaped jobs and career paths. There's many companies that have been on the decline. Now they're starting to rebound in a big way. There's these things create winners and losers, and you need to be able to evaluate things from the pros and cons, and especially the risks. So look at those companies. I would be focused on companies that are high growth and treat their talent in a very progressive way, meaning, they want to develop them. They want to broaden their perspectives. They want to move them on to the next level, and so forth. Think about your geographical preferences or limitations. If you're limited to one city, that's only going to, you want to figure out which companies are there in the backyard that align with your agenda. What are my financial goals? Do the jobs that I'm looking for, do they support my lifestyle? So get all of this in play, and don't forget about the supporting cast of supply chain. You've got HR, finance, accounting, IT, sales, marketing, and even what we do, recruitment, sustainability, health, safety, environmental. These are all the supporting casts that support supply chain and make supply chain successful.
Yeah, and so how do you start beginning to turn this into a plan for yourself? So, we've got the SMART framework here. It's a time tested. Some would say worn out, but I would say it's time tested and still relevant today framework. But before you kind of even go into developing a SMART plan, it's got to fit into something that's a bit broader and a bit more holistic on what you want to do. So, ask yourself, what is it that I want to do some moderate time frame out in the future? And by that, I mean, it's probably more than a year, but it's probably not more than 5 years. A 2-3 year horizon is something you can plan towards. Most of us really don't have a good idea. And most predictors have shown people are particularly bad at predicting what they're going to be doing 10, 15, 20 years out to the future. I mean, who knows, with the way the economy is moving and the speed of technology and so forth, certain jobs may not even be around in their shape or form that they are currently in the future. So for example, are you looking to become chief procurement officer of a multi-billion-dollar company or something like that, which is very different than if you want to be head of supply chain, chief supply chain officer, or a chief operating officer of a mid-size organization. And that's a totally different goal, even though it's all within supply chain. Or maybe your eyes are set more modestly. Maybe you're saying, I want to remain in this geographic area. I have ties to this area, family or otherwise, that I need to stay in this metropolitan consolidated area. And so I want to move up as much as I can given that constraint. Then that means the industry here is focused on healthcare, medical, life science products, and so forth. So how do I build in that constraint? That's a different constraint. And alternatively, you might say, well, I would like to run an international operation one day, or at least part of an international operation. So I'd love to get a 1, 2, 3 year assignment overseas. in a different, totally different culture for my own personal growth and career growth. So think about it from, these various dimensions: geographically, functionally, level, the type of industry you're in. And once you get kind of a little bit of a map of what you want, and it might be a couple of different ones, it may not be a single one, but you have to narrow it down a little bit. And then you begin thinking, okay, now how do I plan towards it? Um, and that's when you can use something like this SMART framework. And the idea is not to be so specific on that it's prescriptive, but the idea is specific enough to help guide your mind. And there is a lot of evidence that says if you write these things down, you're more likely to act on them. There is something that's related just specifically from writing it versus typing it. There's a physical, psychological connection, and there's actually literature out there to support it. So, but the idea is write it down and say, I'd like to be doing this or this a couple of years from now. And then you say, okay, how do I work my way towards it? What are the measures I need? How do I achieve that? It has to be reasonable, right? You don't want something so far out. And one way to think about how reasonable a goal is for you as looking forward to your career is, a lot of people say it should be within your reach, but not quite yet within your grasp. So if you stretch enough, you can reach it, but you don't have to have an act of God to get there. Um, and then it's relevant, meaning it's got to align with your interest. That's why all the stuff at the beginning I talked about here, of matching it to where you want to go, to paint one or two different pictures of where you could be, and then the timeline, 1, 2, 3 years to get there. Then you step back and say, what do I need to do in my job search and networking to get there? And ideally, if you're in a situation where you have some time, what you'd like to do is begin planting the seeds now. 1, 2, 3, 4, and with various different people who can help you along that journey. And they can be sometimes people even that are under you in career development or in career stage, because sometimes those people are connected to other situations. I've seen more than once where a person mentors someone, and 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, that person gets promoted or gets into a company that's attractive, and they get referred to an opportunity there. So all of this effort is not wasted, but you do have to point it in the right direction. So think about, what do I need to do to develop that plan to get me towards it? Where do I need to network? What associations should I be in? And how should I be involved in those so that I get at the right opportunities to get my job search going? And so ideally, as I said, you would like to have time to develop this. If you don't have time, you may have to step right into networking for job search, which is a little bit different than building the base for a potential job search in the future. If you need to do it sooner rather than later, the ways to do it are a little different. So one technique, for example, on job search and networking when you need something somewhat quicker, is to ask for advice. Most people are keen to give advice, or most people will be willing to give advice, and you have a better chance of getting them on the phone and talking to them or meeting them in person if you do it that way, versus saying, hey, do you know of any jobs available, right? And it's not that people don't want to help you, it's that they think to themselves, I don't have any jobs right now, so I'm just going to maybe avoid that situation where I have to talk about it. That's very different than you say, hey, how can we move forward in this, and how can we get some advice from you, and how can I solicit my network? So think about it from that perspective, how your action plan fits in as steps towards your ultimate goal, 1, 2, 3 years out.
Well said, Hinesh. It's so important to write those down in terms of your goals and have action plans. So that's actually what we're getting into. So as I said, we'll have time today to get into optimizing your marketing tools, which are your resume and your LinkedIn. So go back and listen to part 1, supplychaincareers.com, and you can replay that. But make sure you understand the resume. It's got to be easy to scan. LinkedIn, it's got to have the right keywords, and it's got to convey the value that you have delivered to your employers. So get those optimized. So they're attracting the right audience and they're generating the right results, which is typically obviously to land more interviews. We do have a job search tracking template. You do want to stay highly organized. I see people making the mistake all the time of not really having not only goals, not having plans, but not keeping track of their day-to-day activities. So if you want to email rodney.apple@supplychaincareers.com, ask for the job search template, we'll get it to you. And then basically the things you're going to track, obviously the actions that are going to align with your goals, as Hinesh talked about. You want to focus on companies. You don't want to just be open to anybody and everybody. And people make that mistake. At least have somewhere you want to start. So now that you got the target companies, you want to put those on there. Then you start figuring out who are the right people to network with. It could try to find the hiring manager, who's the department leader, who's the head of supply chain, who's the HR or recruiting lead that supports that. As you get through interviews, and referrals, you want to document this. So again, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to share the tool. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you can manipulate for to fit your needs. You want to use the tools to automate. You've got Indeed that crawls most career boards out there. It's almost all inclusive of every job that's posted. Set up those alerts around the criteria that matches the types of role that you're looking for. It's a great way to automate it. You're having your coffee in the morning. You can look and see what new jobs are posted. You also want to create, alerts. You got Google alerts, and you can even automate your social media presence using tools like TweetDeck or Hootsuite if you don't have time to do it, and make sure you're staying out there and you're branding yourself in front of your target audience. Going through the back door, this is the big thing that we want to talk about today is, you get frustrated applying online. So there's ways to go through the back door. You've got your target list of companies. You finally see some postings. You've checked the box. You've applied to them. Now get into LinkedIn Advanced Search, and you can run a search on that company you applied to, looking for the hiring manager or the recruiter or the HR lead or the department head. You might have 3, 4, 5 people you could try to connect with. You could even connect with peers doing the same kind of work. Hey, how did you get in there? I just applied. Could you maybe give me some tips or forward the resume on to the hiring manager? Develop some templates for your messaging so you're not crafting it from scratch, and try to customize it around the individual instead of blasting out scripted messages. There's tools like truepeoplesearch.com. Again, truepeoplesearch.com. It's a free email, phone number lookup. It's another way that you connect with people. Make sure you perfect your elevator pitch. Keep your communication short and simple, 5 sentences or less. You don't want to try to sell them on the first messages. Your goal is to initiate a conversation and then start a dialogue. Make sure you have some good icebreakers. Look at what the company's doing. Look at their news. Hey, I just read you're opening a new factory. I'd love to, understand how that's going to impact, the careers there and so forth. So going through the back door, it's just like it sounds. You want to keep it persistent. Don't make the mistake of one and done. I left the person a message. I never heard back. People are busy. Follow up, and just don't be a stalker. That's the big thing. It's just the right amount of persistence. That follow up, that second or third might be the one that gets you through to that decision maker, gets you an interview, gets you the job. So just bear that in mind. Don't just apply online. Try to do the networking and getting through that back door. And then working with recruiters, just understanding there's typically 2 types. There's those that are dedicated to the corporation or to the company, and then there's those that work on the agency side. I've split my career half on one side, half on the other. And just understand recruiters' job is to find candidates to fill the jobs. It is not to find jobs for candidates. So bear that in mind. There are ways you can engage them, and it's the same thing with networking. Ask for referrals, poll your network, run a Google search, try to find those that align with either your industry or your functional or your geographic, and just have that persistence follow up without being a stalker, and get your resume in their database, get it into their hands, let them know what you're looking for. And at least you've got that engine working for you while you're trying to work directly with companies on your target list. So that's some best ways for you to engage with recruiters. We've also wanted to make you aware, we've just launched the Supply Chain Careers job board. Now it is in the very beginning. And if you go to supplychaincareers.com, or more specifically, jobs.supplychaincareers.com, you can check that out, set up alerts, and get notified when employers post jobs. Let's move on to Q&A. Brian, what questions do we have?
Yeah, so we've had some good ones come in. One of them was, I think this person missed the name of some of the supply chain management associations. I was wondering if you could maybe list off a few of those.
Yeah, better yet, I know we've got this on our SCM. So if you go to scmtalent.com, and if you look under job seekers, there are some resources there. We've got, if you go look under supply chain associations, we've got most of the major associations there that relate to supply chain. And we've also got the top supply chain, blogs, YouTube channels. So we've got a whole list of lists out there. Again, scmtalent.com, look under job seekers, and you've got the whole list there.
Cool. What networking advice would you give to someone who is switching their career mid to early 40s or leaving the military?
Yeah, that's a great one. And thank you for your service. I do feel supply chain and logistics is a fabulous area. There's so many folks that come out of the military, all different branches that move into careers in supply chain. And so kind of back to the point I made earlier, I think it's critical to find those, let's say you're in the Marines. You can, most people put that experience on their LinkedIn profile. If you don't, you absolutely should, because I think it is very important, especially if you worked in operations, which are where a lot of those roles are at. But I think you start out, following the recipe we've put together through this webinar. But what I would first start out with is polling folks that have served before you, that have already transitioned into supply chain, and then figuring out who are the employers that have strong military or veterans hiring programs. Amazon is one, clearly. And then you've got a lot of the big box retailers, any company that has a large network of operations, transportation, logistics, fulfillment, likely are good places where you can leverage those transferable skills and put those to use for companies. So I would start with networking with those that have served before you and have transitioned already into different companies and different industries.
Great answer. We have another one come in that says, I currently work in logistics. Do you have any suggestions for someone like me looking to change my role into sourcing direct materials in another company?
Yeah, first and foremost, anytime you switch careers, whether it be industry, and I would say especially a function, it's not the easiest thing to do if you're going from, logistics to procurement. Now, inside of logistics, there obviously is a procurement and sourcing function. You got to find the carriers, you got to engage with them, contract with them. So sometimes, if you can obtain that experience in your current role or within your current department, it's nice to pick that up. And maybe you can even be able to make a claim to stay where you're at if you can get that experience. And obviously, if you can't, you certainly, I would recommend, looking down the route of training and certifications. I know ASCM just launched a new procurement certificate that is kind of geared towards that 101, 102. I don't want to say entry, but it gives you the kind of the foundation. And then you've got the Institute of Supply Management, or ISM. They're kind of the main association for sourcing and procurement. So I would definitely join there and look into some of their training and certificate programs. So it's, advancing your education is one way. Once you feel like you've got some good transferable skills, though, you want to make sure you showcase those on your resume front and center, as well as your LinkedIn profile. And then you get down to the good old networking and try to network with others. But just remember, try to pick up the experience where you're at now that can help you and better position you to transfer externally to another company. Because it is difficult, to completely switch careers, moving from one company to other. It's always easier when you can pick up that experience, whether it's internally or through external training, to make that move.
Mm-hmm. This next question's a little broad, but what are some current pain points or bottlenecks in supply chain today?
Yeah, I can take that one. So, the supply chain is kind of as big a pain point as one can imagine in recent history right now. So at the macro level, some of the biggest pain points are around international logistics. So if you see what Maersk is having problems with their they're the largest container vendor in the world, or container shipper in the world. And they're having all sorts of issues getting enough containers. There are backlogs at the ports, and this is internationally. It's particularly acute on the Pacific Rim, uh, both in the U.S. like Long Beach, and on the Asian side as well, from China, Hong Kong, Singapore, et cetera, and other major shipping ports. So you're seeing, at the macro level there, you're seeing, it complicated because of the economic recovery. So just the volume, the sheer volume has gone up. So while the economy is maybe picking up 5, 6, 8%, 10%, the volume is picking up 10, 15, 20%, compounded with some of these container and other shipping issues makes it even worse. And then you compound that further with the changing volume, the changing routes of shipping. So hospitality and entertainment is picking up in much of the developed world. So Western Europe, U.S., and so that means food and other items are going less to homes, less through grocery channel, and more through Cisco and Compass Group and these other food service companies that provide into hotels, into Disneyland, into Las Vegas, into tourist places, into restaurants. And that's an entirely different channel. So you're seeing a whiplash or a whipsaw effect going back and forth due to COVID. So and then of course there's shortages that are going on in chips and so forth, which is impacting the automotive supply chain. So those are some of the big ones we're seeing, and what that's translating into is talent shortages in certain areas. And I would say probably half or more of supply chain in terms of industries are impacted, and so the positions are impacted. We're seeing it in procurement, we're seeing it in integrated supply chain management, we're seeing it in distribution and logistics. So it's pretty far and wide. There are certain industries where maybe it's not as impacted because volume is reduced. So the industries that might suffer a little as things go back to normal might have a little bit lesser volume. So for example, grocery stores may have volume going down a bit as food ships away. But in general, those are some of the pain points we're seeing. So that could impact how you look at your job search and how you look at your networking over the course of the next 6, 12, 18 months.
Great answer. Great answer. Another one is, how do you sell yourself to an employer for a role that you might not have a strong experience for, but have credentials and industry experience? For example, if a person wants to move from purchasing supply chain management roles to NPI supply chain role to an NPI supply chain role.
Yeah, so one way, to get into areas where you're not as, your experience is not as suitable or not as perfect of a match. A little bit of this is what Rodney answered earlier. The best thing is if you can get it internally within your own company, but I'm making the assumption that you can't, but that is what you should definitely try. So for people who have this in mind, but have a longer time horizon, do try to pick up some of these. Maybe it's a cross-functional project team that you can get onto that does some of these new product introduction programs, even if it's just a project. So you can actually legitimately put that into your experience and onto your resume, onto your LinkedIn profile. So that's what you ideally want to do, is build up towards it organically, internally. But let's suppose you can't. Well, companies do hire based on other parameters. Experience is pretty high up there, but there are many notable exceptions. Sometimes people will hire based on potential. Sometimes industry experience is very important. So, for example, if they want someone in new product introduction, but you come from procurement, there are situations where there's a new product introduction team, but they have a gap on the team in someone who knows how to source the new components that are going to go into this launch. Look for opportunities like that. Look for industries where that's important. Look for companies where they're getting ready to construct a supply chain for a launch, so that your skill set can be leveraged in that situation. And now you get part of new product introduction, but you get to bring to the table the fact that I know this industry, I know from where you're sourcing, I can provide that of value. And if you're a high potential, sometimes if you take a lateral move in the organization, you can, from one organization, unless you can demonstrate that you have the potential, the runway to move up. So people hire based on different things. So look for situations where your background and the skills you might have might be overweighted in the type of job that you're looking for, even though it might be in a slightly different or materially different function.
Guess we can do one more. This is a good one. How does one transition from public sector to private sector? I currently work in the government and would like to make a change.
Yeah, we do get this pretty often, and you know, the supply chain segment, especially procurement, you know, it's called contracting or subcontracting, and you know, a lot of federal or state, you know, regulations that you have to adhere to and understand, and so it is different. Now, the good news is that there are bountiful opportunities on the civilian side, and it really takes effort, though. You have to, I'd say, be a little open-minded and be patient, and networking is paramount, especially when you're transitioning like from a government to non-government. So think about the companies. You know, I think the easiest path from an A to B is going to be looking at the defense or you know, contractors to the government. And so if you can kind of figure out a lot of companies selling to the government, a lot of retailers, a lot of manufacturers. I mean, government is the number one customer. Everybody says Walmart is, but you know, the federal government spends the most money on goods and services. So it's kind of transitioning. You know, looking at it to the subcontractors. So you have that insider knowledge of how the government works and operates from behind the scenes. That can be of immense value to companies that are vying to either do business with the federal government or do more business. So just bear that in mind. But at the end of the day, I think following, you know, the kind of the recipe that we've talked about here, with having, you know, a written strategy, it aligns with your goals. You've got the right action steps. You understand what you're good at. You understand what you're not good at. You understand what you like to do, what you don't like to do. And then from there, it's really networking. And, you know, you may not have a big network to start out with, but everybody starts somewhere. And I think it has to center around, you know, the top priorities that align with your goals. So, you know, where are those opportunities? You know, yeah, the subcontractors are kind of an obvious choice, but you can open it up outside of there as well. But it all starts with goal planning and writing that down and figuring out, you know, what you want to do when you transfer. Ideally, you're leveraging your current transferable skills. That's always easier than trying to go off and to do something that's not even remotely close to what you're doing. That is the longest path to make that transition. So hopefully that helps. But it all starts with pen and paper. And then from there, it's having the right activities and the right amount of networking with the right people and the right companies. That is where the magic occurs. All right. Well, thank you so much for attending part 2. You can see here on the slide, we've got the final webinar coming up on May the 25th, 2 p.m. Eastern time. We've talked about resume and LinkedIn profile optimization, getting your key marketing documents in order. Then we've talked about how to develop a job search strategy, how to leverage online and in-person networking. That's hopefully coming back here in 2021. And then the next phase here is, you've landed interviews. What happens next? How do you prepare? And then when you hopefully get that offer, how do you negotiate an offer that aligns with your goals and so forth, and get the best package that you possibly can? So again, thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you on the 25th.